The Galactic Melting Pot. The neon lights of Starbase Omega pulsed in a dizzying array of colors, casting an otherworldly glow on the faces of countless alien species mingling in its bustling corridors. Among the throng of extraterrestrial life forms, a group of humans stood out, not for their appearance, but for the way other species gave them a wide berth. Jake Morrison, a burly ex-Marine with a shock of red hair, strode confidently through the crowd, his friends Sarah Chen and Dmitry Volkov flanking him. They were headed to the Nebula's Edge, a bar known for its colorful clientele and potent drinks. You'd think after 5 years, they'd be used to us by now, Sarah muttered, her dark eyes scanning the wary faces around them. Dmitry chuckled, his thick Russian accent cutting through the ambient noise. Oh, they're used to us all right. That's why they're scared. As they entered the Nebula's Edge, the cacophony of alien languages hit them like a wave. The bar was a microcosm of the galaxy, a place where species from 1,000 worlds came to drink, deal, and occasionally duke it out. The bartender, a Zarillian with 4 arms and iridescent scales, nodded at the humans as they approached. "The usual, Morrison?" he asked, already reaching for a bottle of Terran whiskey. "You know it, Selg," Jake replied, settling onto a stool that creaked under his weight. "How's business?" Selg's compound eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of amusement. "Lively as ever. Just had to break up a fight between a Cronin and a Vexi. Thought they'd tear the place apart." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "And you stopped them yourself?" "Course not." Selg laughed, the sound like gravel in a blender. "Called security. I'm not crazy enough to get between 2 titans like that." As Selg poured their drinks, Jake couldn't help but notice the glances thrown their way. A group of Flockshins, their tentacles writhing nervously, whispered among themselves. A lone Drexian mercenary eyed them warily, hand never straying far from the blaster at its hip. "You ever wonder," Dmitry mused, swirling his drink, "why they call Earth a death world? I mean, compared to some of the places these guys come from, it seems pretty tame." Jake shrugged. "Gravity, atmospheric pressure, pathogens. Take your pick. To them, we're walking disaster zones." "It's more than that," Sarah interjected, her voice low. "It's not just our world they fear, it's us." As if to punctuate her point, a commotion erupted at the far end of the bar. A Silvaki, its crystalline body glittering under the lights, was engaged in a heated argument with a Tauren, a bull-like species known for their short tempers. "You dare accuse me of cheating?" the Tauren bellowed, its voice reverberating through the bar. "I'll crush you into space dust." The Silvaki, despite being half the size of the Tauren, stood its ground. "Your primitive mind couldn't comprehend the complexities of galactic poker if I spent a solar cycle explaining it to you." Jake exchanged glances with his friends. They'd seen this dance before. Posturing, threats, maybe a shove or 2 before security stepped in. But something felt different this time. The air crackled with tension, and other patrons were already backing away, forming a ring around the feuding aliens. "Should we do something?" Sarah asked, her hand instinctively reaching for the stunner concealed in her jacket. Jake held up a hand. "Not yet. Let's see how this plays out." The Tauren snorted, pawing at the ground. "I've had enough of your insults, Crystal Brain." With surprising speed for its bulk, it charged at the Silvaki. What happened next stunned everyone in the bar. The Silvaki, rather than dodging or calling for help, met the charge head-on. Its crystalline body shifted, edges sharpening into razor-like protrusions. As the Tauren made contact, a horrible screeching filled the air, like nails on a chalkboard amplified 1,000-fold. The Tauren reeled back, bellowing in pain and rage. Dark blood oozed from cuts all over its body where it had impacted the Silvaki's crystalline defense. "Holy shit," Dmitry breathed. "Didn't see that coming." The bar erupted into chaos. Friends of both aliens jumped into the fray, turning what had been a one-on-one confrontation into a full-scale brawl. Chairs flew, tables overturned, and the air filled with a cacophony of alien war cries. Jake knocked back the rest of his whiskey and stood up. "Well, folks, looks like our quiet drink just got interesting." Sarah unholstered her stunner, a grim smile on her face. "So much for staying out of trouble." "Trouble?" Dmitri grinned, cracking his knuckles. "This is just a Tuesday night for Deathworlders." As the humans prepared to wade into the melee, they didn't notice the pair of glowing eyes watching them from a shadowy corner. The observer, an Exilian known for their psychic abilities, sensed something different about these humans, something that set them apart not just from the other species in the bar, but from their own kind as well. The Exilian's telepathic message rippled through subspace, reaching its intended recipients light years away. The rumors are true. The Deathworlders are evolving, and they're more dangerous than we ever imagined. With that ominous proclamation hanging in the ether, Jake, Sarah, and Dmitri plunged into the chaotic heart of the brawl, unaware that their actions tonight would set in motion events that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The story of how Deathworlders became the most feared species in the cosmos was about to unfold, one bar fight at a time. Tensions rise. The nebula's edge had descended into utter chaos. What had started as a dispute between a Tauren and a Silvaki had escalated into a full-scale interspecies brawl. Amidst the mayhem, Jake, Sarah, and Dmitri found themselves at the epicenter of the storm. Jake ducked as a chair whistled past his head, smashing into splinters against the bar behind him. "Dmitri, on your six," he shouted, watching a hulking Cronin lumber towards his friend. Dmitri spun around, eyes widening at the sight of the rocky behemoth bearing down on him. But instead of panic, a gleam of excitement flashed in the Russian's eyes. As the Cronin swung a massive fist, Dmitri dropped low, using the alien's momentum against it. With a grunt of effort, he heaved upward, flipping the surprised Cronin over his shoulder. The rocky alien crashed into a table, reducing it to kindling. It lay there, blinking in confusion, clearly unused to being manhandled by a species half its size. "Nice move," Sarah called out, her voice barely audible over the din of the fight. She was holding her own against a pair of Vexi, her martial arts training evident in every fluid movement. The serpentine aliens, despite their superior reach, couldn't land a solid hit on the nimble human. Jake, meanwhile, found himself face to face with the Tauren that had started the whole mess. The bull-like alien snorted, blood still oozing from the cuts inflicted by the Silvaki. "Out of my way, Deathworlder," it growled, "unless you want to join that crystal pest in pieces." Jake raised an eyebrow, his stance relaxed but ready. "Now that's not very neighborly," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "How about we all calm down and talk this out over a nice cold?" He never finished the sentence. The Tauren, enraged by what it perceived as mockery, charged. But Jake was ready. Years of combat training kicked in, and he sidestepped at the last moment, grabbing one of the Tauren's horns as it passed. Using the alien's own momentum, Jake redirected its charge, sending it crashing into the bar. Zelg, the bartender, let out a string of alien curses as bottles shattered and liquor sprayed everywhere. "Morrison," he yelled, all four arms gesticulating wildly, "if you wreck my bar, you're paying for it." Jake flashed an apologetic grin. "Put it on my tab, Zelg." He turned back to the Tauren, which was struggling to its feet, shaking off the impact, ready to reconsider that talk. But the fight was far from over. The Silvaki, its crystalline body glinting wickedly in the chaotic light of the bar, had regrouped with several of its kind. They moved in perfect synchronization, their bodies shifting and morphing to create a bristling, razor-sharp phalanx. "Incoming," Dmitri warned, backing away from the advancing crystal formation. "I don't fancy being sliced into human sushi today." Sarah, having dispatched the Vexi with a few well-placed stun shots, assessed the situation quickly. "We need to contain this before it spreads to the rest of the station," she said, her tactical mind already formulating a plan. Jake, Think you can reason with our bull-headed friend over there?" Jake nodded, keeping one eye on the Tauren and another on the advancing Silvaki. "Worth a shot. Cover me." As Jake approached the Tauren, hands raised in a universal gesture of peace, the atmosphere in the bar shifted. The various alien species, many of whom had been caught up in the frenzy of the fight, began to take notice of the humans' actions. "Listen," Jake said to the Tauren, his voice firm but non-threatening. "This has gone far enough. You're hurt, property's been damaged, and for what? A misunderstanding over a card game." The Tauren's nostrils flared, but Jake could see a glimmer of reason returning to its eyes. The Silvaki. It cheated. The alien rumbled, though with less conviction than before. "Maybe it did, maybe it didn't," Jake conceded. "But is it worth turning this place into a war zone? Look around you. This isn't just about you and the Silvaki anymore." As if to emphasize his point, a stray energy blast from an overturned weapon scorched the ceiling, raining debris down on the combatants. The Tauren flinched, its eyes darting around the devastated bar. Meanwhile, Sarah and Dmitri had positioned themselves between the advancing Silvaki and the rest of the brawlers. "That's far enough," Sarah called out, her stunner raised but not fired. "We can end this peacefully, or we can see how your crystals hold up against concentrated ion blasts. Your choice." The lead Silvaki, its faceted face unreadable, paused. The harmonic hum filled the air as the crystalline aliens communicated among themselves. After a tense moment, their sharp edges began to dull, their aggressive formation relaxing. "We may have overreacted," the lead Silvaki admitted, its voice like chimes in the wind. "The accusation of cheating was unfounded and insulting, but our response was disproportionate." A collective sigh of relief seemed to sweep through the bar. The various aliens, many nursing injuries or picking themselves up from the floor, began to lower their weapons and appendages. But just as it seemed the crisis had been averted, a new voice cut through the uneasy calm. Well, what do we have here?" All eyes turned to the entrance of the nebula's edge. There, framed by the neon lights of the corridor beyond, stood a squad of galactic peacekeepers. Their sleek, powered armor hummed with barely contained energy, and their faceless helmets swept across the scene, taking in the devastation. The lead peacekeeper, distinguished by the gold trim on its armor, stepped forward. Its helmet retracted, revealing the stern features of Agenta, a species known for their strict adherence to law and order. "By the authority of the Galactic Council," the Agenta announced, its voice amplified to fill every corner of the bar, "this establishment is hereby closed pending a full investigation. All patrons are to submit to immediate questioning and biometric scanning." Jake shared a worried glance with Sarah and Dmitri. They had intervened to stop the fight, but would the peacekeepers see it that way? And more importantly, how would the other aliens react to this show of authority? The tension in the nebula's edge, which had just begun to dissipate, returned in full force. But this time, it wasn't directed at each other. Every eye in the bar, human and alien alike, was fixed on the peacekeepers. In that moment, standing amidst the wreckage of tables and chairs, surrounded by a motley crew of battered and bruised aliens, Jake realized something profound. Despite their differences, despite the fear and mistrust that often colored interactions between Deathworlders and other species, they were all in this together now. The real test wasn't the bar fight they'd just survived. It was what came next. As the peacekeepers began to move into the bar, their weapons at the ready, Jake took a deep breath. He caught Sarah's eye and gave a subtle nod. Whatever happened next, the humans would face it as they always had, with determination, adaptability, and a stubborn refusal to back down. The galaxy was about to learn that when pushed into a corner, Deathworlders didn't just fight back. They changed the rules of the game entirely. The brawl begins. The nebula's edge, once a bustling hub of interstellar socializing, now stood silent as a tomb. The galactic peacekeepers had moved in, their powered armor humming ominously as they began to corral the diverse array of aliens and humans. Jake Morrison stood his ground, flanked by Sarah and Dmitri. His mind raced, assessing the situation. The peacekeepers were known for their heavy-handed approach, often escalating situations rather than diffusing them. If this turned ugly, it wouldn't just be a bar fight. It could become an interstellar incident. The lead peacekeeper, the stern-faced Genta, approached Jake. Its multifaceted eyes gleamed with barely contained disdain. "You," it said, voice tripping with authority, "seem to be at the center of this disturbance. Identify yourself, Deathworlder." Jake straightened, meeting the Genta's gaze without flinching. "Jake Morrison, former Terran Marine, now independent contractor. My friends and I were trying to stop the fight, not start it." The Genta's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or annoyance. "Deathworlders, always in the thick of trouble. You'll be the first to undergo questioning and scanning." As the peacekeeper reached for Jake's arm, a low growl rumbled through the bar. The Tauran, still nursing its wounds from the earlier scuffle, stepped forward. "Wait," it bellowed, drawing all eyes to its massive form. "The human speaks the truth. They tried to stop the fight." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The Silvaki, their crystalline bodies still bristling with tension, added their harmonic voices to the mix. "We can confirm this." The humans showed unexpected restraint. The Genta paused, its compound eyes flicking between Jake and the aliens. For a moment, the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, unexpectedly, a new voice joined the fray. "Oh, for the love of the cosmic egg, will you trigger-happy peacekeepers ever learn to ask questions before waving your guns around?" All heads turned to see Selg, the four-armed bartender, pushing his way through the crowd. Despite the chaos that had engulfed his establishment, the Zarilian seemed more annoyed than afraid. "I've got security footage of the whole thing," Selg continued, waving one of his arms dismissively. "These humans didn't start anything. In fact, they probably saved me a fortune in property damage by cooling things down." The Genta's antennae twitched, a sign of uncertainty. It was clear the situation wasn't as cut and dry as it had initially assumed. "Very well," it said after a moment's consideration. "We'll review the footage, but no one leaves until we've sorted this out." As the peacekeeper turned to confer with its squad, Jake felt a tap on his shoulder. It was Dmitri, his eyes gleaming with that look that always spelled trouble. "We can't let them corral us like this," Dmitri whispered, his accent thickening with tension. "Those scanners they're carrying. I've heard rumors. They're not just for identification. They can dig deep, pull out information we might not want shared." Sarah nodded grimly. "He's right, Jake. Remember Epsilon IX, the data breach that compromised half the human colonies in the Orion Arm? It all started with routine peacekeeper scans." Jake's mind raced. They couldn't afford to have their biometric data in peacekeeper hands, not with the sensitive work they did. But resisting would only confirm the worst suspicions about Deathworlders. They needed a third option. As if in answer to his unspoken dilemma, the lights in the nebula's edge suddenly flickered and died, plunging the bar into darkness. The peacekeeper's armor illuminated, casting eerie shadows across the faces of the assembled aliens. "Power failure," one of the peacekeepers barked. "Possible hostile action. Prepare for." The rest of the order was drowned out by a cacophony of shouts, crashes, and the distinctive whine of energy weapons powering up. In the chaos and darkness, it was impossible to tell friend from foe. Jake felt a hand grab his arm. Sarah's touch, unmistakable even in the mayhem. "Now's our chance," she hissed. "We need to move." But Jake hesitated. Running now would only confirm their guilt in the eyes of the peacekeepers. More than that, it felt wrong to leave the other aliens to face the music alone, especially after they had spoken up in the humans' defense. "No," Jake said, his voice firm even as adrenaline surged through his system. "We're not running. We're taking charge." With a speed that belied his size, Jake vaulted over the nearest table, using it as an impromptu platform. In the dim emergency lighting, his silhouette stood out starkly. "Everyone, listen up," he roared, his voice cutting through the chaos like a plasma cutter through hull plating. "This is not the time to panic. Peacekeepers, power down your weapons. Everyone else, stay calm and stay where you are. We are not your enemies here." To everyone's surprise, the commotion began to subside. Aliens of all species turned to face Jake, their eyes, optical sensors, and other sensory organs fixed on the human who dared to take command in the face of Peacekeeper authority. The lead Genta pushed through the crowd, its armor's lights focused on Jake. "You dare to give orders, Deathworlder. This is a Galactic Peacekeeper operation." Jake met the Peacekeeper's gaze unflinchingly. "With all due respect, your operation was about to turn a bar scuffle into an interstellar incident. Look around you. Humans, Taurans, Silvaki, Zarlians, we were all getting along fine before you charged in. We settled our differences. Isn't that what real peace is about?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Even some of the junior peacekeepers were nodding, though they quickly stopped when their commander glared at them. "You speak of peace," the Genta said, its voice dripping with skepticism. "Yet your kind are known as Deathworlders. How can creatures born of violence truly understand harmony?" It was Dmitri who answered, stepping up beside Jake. "We understand it precisely, because we come from a world that challenges us at every turn. We know the value of cooperation, of standing together against common threats. Isn't that the very foundation of your Galactic Council?" Sarah joined them, her voice calm but carrying to every corner of the now silent bar. "We're not asking you to trust us blindly. We're asking you to judge us by our actions, here and now. We could have run when the lights went out. Instead, we're standing here, ready to work with you to resolve this peacefully." The Genta's antennae twitched rapidly, a sign of intense thought. The standoff stretched for what felt like hours, but was likely only a few tense moments. Finally, the Peacekeeper spoke. "Your words are compelling. Perhaps we have been too hasty in our judgment." It turned to address the crowd. "We will review the security footage and take statements from all involved. But there will be no forced scans, no detentions without cause." A collective sigh of relief swept through the nebula's edge. As the lights flickered back to life, Jake saw aliens of various species nodding in approval, some even clapping their appendages together in the universal sign of appreciation. Zelg, the bartender, approached Jake with a mixture of exasperation and admiration on his alien features. "Well, Morrison, looks like you've done it again. Saved my bar and possibly prevented an interstellar diplomatic crisis. Your tab is officially cleared." Jake couldn't help but grin. "Thanks, Zelg. Though I have a feeling we might be running up a new one before the night's over. Something tells me everyone here could use a drink after all this excitement." As the tension in the bar began to dissipate, replaced by a buzz of excited conversation and even some laughter, Jake exchanged looks with Sarah and Dmitri. They had averted a crisis, but they all knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy had seen something today. Deathworlders not as mindless brutes, but as mediators, problem solvers, and unexpectedly, peacekeepers in their own right. The repercussions of this night would echo across the stars, changing perceptions and possibly the balance of power itself. As aliens of various species approached the humans, some to thank them, others simply curious to talk, Jake realized that they had inadvertently started something much bigger than a bar fight. They had sparked a change in how the galaxy viewed Deathworlders. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was adapting to and thriving in the face of change. Unexpected allies. The atmosphere in the nebula's edge had transformed dramatically. What had started as a chaotic brawl, followed by a tense standoff with galactic peacekeepers, had now evolved into something entirely unexpected. An impromptu interspecies mixer. Jake, Sarah, and Dmitri found themselves at the center of attention, surrounded by curious aliens eager to interact with the Deathworlders who had shown such unexpected diplomacy and restraint. "I must admit," chirped Avexi, its serpentine body coiled comfortably around a bar stool, "I had my doubts about you humans, but the way you handled the peacekeepers, most impressive." Mitri grinned, raising his glass in a toast. "We're full of surprises. It's a Deathworlder specialty." As the conversation flowed, along with Selg's seemingly endless supply of exotic beverages, Jake noticed something peculiar. The aliens weren't just talking to the humans. They were starting to mingle more freely with each other. Species that had been at each other's throats earlier were now engaged in animated discussions, sharing drinks, and even attempting to learn each other's customs. Sarah leaned in close, her voice low. "Jake, are you seeing this? It's like we've sparked some kind of interspecies solidarity." Before Jake could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. The lead peacekeeper, the Genta, was returning, but this time without its imposing armor. Instead, it wore what appeared to be a formal diplomatic uniform. The bar fell silent as the Genta approached Jake. Its multifaceted eyes seemed to hold a new respect, tinged with curiosity. "Mr. Morrison," it began, its tone notably less hostile than before, "I owe you and your companions an apology. After reviewing the security footage and statements from witnesses, it's clear that you played a crucial role in defusing a potentially disastrous situation." Jake nodded, accepting the apology with grace. "Thank you, officer. We're just glad everything worked out peacefully." The Genta's antennae twitched in what Jake was beginning to recognize as a sign of deep thought. "There is another matter I wish to discuss with you. Privately, if possible." Intrigued, Jake followed the peacekeeper to a quiet corner of the bar, motioning for Sarah and Dmitri to stay alert but not to follow. Once they were relatively alone, the Genta spoke in hushed tones. "What happened here tonight? It's unprecedented. In all my years of service, I've never seen such diverse species come together like this, especially not under the leadership of a Deathworlder," Jake finished, a wry smile on his face. The Genta nodded. "Precisely. It has not escaped our notice that tensions between various galactic factions have been rising. There are those who believe a conflict is inevitable, but what I've witnessed here suggests another possibility." Jake leaned in, his interest piqued. "What are you suggesting, officer?" "An initiative," the Genta replied, its voice filled with a sudden enthusiasm. "A joint task force, combining the unique strengths of various species, including humans. Your adaptability, your knack for unconventional problem-solving, it could be invaluable in maintaining peace across the galaxy." Jake's mind raced with the implications. This wasn't just about clearing their names or avoiding a diplomatic incident anymore. This was an opportunity to reshape human-alien relations on a galactic scale. "It's an intriguing idea," Jake said carefully, "but I'm just one human. I can't speak for our entire species." The Genta's mandibles clicked in what Jake now recognized as amusement. "Of course not. But you can be the start. A proof of concept, if you will. Your actions here have already begun to change perceptions. Imagine what could be accomplished with official support and resources." As Jake pondered the proposal, a commotion erupted from the main area of the bar. He turned to see Dmitri standing on a table, his booming voice carrying across the room. "Friends, aliens, sentient beings of all kinds," Dmitri called out, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Who's up for a friendly test of strength? I propose a series of challenges, pitting the unique abilities of each species against one another. Not in combat, but in the spirit of camaraderie." To Jake's amazement, the suggestion was met with enthusiastic cheers from across the bar. Species that had been eyeing each other warily earlier were now clamoring to participate. Sarah, ever the tactician, quickly took charge of organizing the impromptu competition. "All right, let's set some ground rules. Each challenge should showcase a particular strength or ability. We'll have judges from different species to ensure fairness. And most importantly, this is about learning from each other, not proving superiority. As the bar transformed into a bizarre interstellar Olympic arena, Jake turned back to the Genta, a new idea forming. "You know, officer, I think we might be witnessing the beginning of your initiative right here." The peacekeeper's eyes widened as it observed the scene. Taurens were setting up a strength challenge, their massive forms straining against weights that would crush most other species. Nearby, a group of Silvaki were demonstrating their crystalline transformations, turning their bodies into dazzling works of art. Even the Vexai had joined in, showcasing their flexibility in what appeared to be an alien version of Limbo. "Remarkable," the Genta murmured. "They're bonding, learning about each other's capabilities without fear or hostility." Jake nodded, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. This is what humans do best. We adapt, we bring people together, we find common ground in the most unlikely places. As they watched, Dmitri was attempting to match a Cronin in a rock-lifting contest, his face red with exertion but grinning from ear to ear. Sarah, meanwhile, had initiated a problem-solving challenge, presenting mixed-species teams with complex puzzles that required diverse skills to solve. The Genta turned to Jake, its alien features set in a determined expression. "Mr. Morrison, I believe we have the beginnings of something truly revolutionary here. Are you and your companions willing to help us take this forward? To show the galaxy what can be achieved when we look past our differences and work together?" Jake looked around the bar one more time. He saw beings from across the cosmos laughing, competing, and forming bonds that would have seemed impossible just hours ago. In that moment, he knew his answer. "Officer," Jake said, extending his hand in the human gesture of agreement, "I think you've got yourself a deal." As the Genta awkwardly but earnestly grasped Jake's hand, a cheer erupted from the crowd. Dmitri had apparently managed to lift a weight that even the Cronin found challenging, proving once again that Deathworlders were full of surprises. Jake couldn't help but laugh. This wasn't how he had expected the night to go when he and his friends had first entered the nebula's edge. But then again, expecting the unexpected was part of being a Deathworlder. As he moved to join the festivities, Jake realized that they had done more than just prevent a bar fight or avoid an interstellar incident. They had taken the first steps towards changing the very fabric of galactic society. The Deathworlders were no longer just survivors from a harsh planet. They were becoming bridges between worlds, catalysts for a new era of cooperation and understanding. And this, Jake thought as he watched aliens of all shapes and sizes cheering on a human arm wrestling a Tauren, was just the beginning. Aftermath and revelation. As the artificial dawn broke over Starbase Omega, casting a warm glow through the viewport of the nebula's edge, Jake Morrison found himself in a situation he never could have anticipated 24 hours earlier. The bar, which had been the site of a near-disastrous brawl, followed by a tense standoff with galactic peacekeepers, now resembled the aftermath of the galaxy's most unlikely diplomatic summit. Aliens of various species were sprawled across tables and chairs, some snoring in tones that ranged from subsonic rumbles to high-pitched whistles. The impromptu Olympic Games had evolved into an all-night cultural exchange, with species sharing not just their physical capabilities, but their histories, cultures, and dreams. Jake, nursing a cup of strong Terran coffee, a commodity that had become surprisingly popular among the alien patrons, sat at the bar next to Sarah and Dmitri. They were joined by an unlikely trio: the Genta peacekeeper, the Tauren who had started the original fight, and Selk, the long-suffering Zarlian bartender. "I still can't quite believe what I'm seeing," the Genta mused, its compound eyes taking in the scene of interspecies camaraderie. "In all my years of peacekeeping, I've never witnessed anything like this." The Tauren, looking somewhat sheepish, an impressive feat for a being resembling a 2-ton battle bull, nodded in agreement. "I came here looking for a fight," it rumbled. "Instead, I found understanding and friends." It cast a sidelong glance at Jake, even among Deathworlders. Seld chuckled, the sound like gravel in a blender. Just wait until they all wake up and realize the tab they've run up. That'll be a true test of interstellar diplomacy. As laughter rippled through the small group, Jake felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to see a Nixilian, its glowing eyes regarding him with an intensity that was slightly unnerving. "Deathworlder," the Nixilian began, its telepathic voice resonating in Jake's mind. "I have observed your actions, and those of your companions, with great interest. There is more to you than meets the eye, is there not?" Jake exchanged quick glances with Sarah and Dimitri. They had worked hard to keep their true nature under wraps, but it seemed the perceptive Nixilian had sensed something. After a moment's hesitation, Jake decided that honesty was the best policy. "You're right," he admitted. "We're not just ordinary humans. We're part of a special program." The Genta's antennae twitched with interest. "Special program? Explain, please." Sarah leaned in, her voice low but clear. "Earth has been preparing for greater galactic integration for years. We're part of an initiative to bridge the gap between humans and other species. Enhanced strength, accelerated learning capabilities, advanced problem-solving skills. We're prototypes, in a way." Mitri grinned, flexing an arm playfully. "Think of us as Deathworlders 2.0. All the adaptability of standard humans, with a few extra perks." The revelation sent a ripple of murmurs through the assembled aliens. The Tauren looked particularly impressed. "So that's how you managed to redirect my charge," it said, a note of admiration in its deep voice. The Genta, however, looked troubled. "This enhancement program, is it preparation for conflict? Are you creating super soldiers?" Jake shook his head firmly. "Not at all. We're diplomats, explorers, problem solvers. Our enhancements aren't for domination, but for understanding, to better relate to and work alongside other species." "It's true," the Nixilian interjected, its telepathic voice carrying a note of wonder. "I sense no deception, no hostility, only a genuine desire for cooperation." As the implications of this revelation sank in, Seld burst out laughing. "Oh, this is rich. You mean to tell me that the galaxy has been fear-mongering about Deathworlders all this time, and meanwhile, you've been secretly leveling up to be better neighbors? That's the most human thing I've ever heard." The laughter proved contagious, spreading through the bar as the story was telepathically and verbally relayed. Soon, the entire establishment was alive with a mix of amusement, amazement, and newfound respect. As the excitement settled, the Genta turned to Jake, its demeanor now one of utmost seriousness. "Mr. Morrison, I believe this changes everything. The initiative we discussed earlier, the Joint Task Force, it's more crucial than ever. With beings like you and your companions as the bridge between humans and other species, we could usher in a new era of galactic cooperation." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "We're ready to do our part. But it can't just be about us. Every species here has something unique to offer. The strength of the Taurens, the adaptability of the Silvaki, the perception of the Nixilians. Imagine what we could accomplish if we all worked together." As if on cue, representatives from various species began to step forward, offering their support and expertise. The Tauren pledged the strength of its people for peacekeeping missions. A Silvaki offered to share their crystalline technology for more efficient space travel. Even the Vexi, known for their neutrality, expressed interest in joining the diplomatic corps. Sarah, ever the strategist, was already sketching out plans on a datapad. "We'll need training programs, cultural exchange initiatives, joint scientific research projects." Dimitri, his eyes gleaming with excitement, chimed in. "And think of the possibilities for space exploration. Mixed species crews, combining our various strengths and adaptabilities. We could go further, discover more than any single species could alone." As the discussion grew more animated, with ideas and proposals flying back and forth, Jake took a moment to step back and observe. The scene before him was nothing short of miraculous. Beings from across the galaxy, who mere hours ago had been at each other's throats, now planning a shared future with enthusiasm and hope. Zelg sidled up to Jake, a knowing look in his multifaceted eyes. "You know, Morrison, when you first started coming to my bar, I thought you were just another Deathworlder looking for trouble. Now look at what you've started." Jake smiled, watching as Sarah explained a concept to a group of fascinated aliens, while Dmitri arm wrestled with the Tauren, both of them laughing. "We didn't start this, Zelg. We just gave it a little push." The desire for understanding, for cooperation, it was always there. Sometimes it just takes a catalyst to bring it out. The Zaralian bartender nodded sagely. "Well, whatever you want to call it, I have a feeling the galaxy's never going to be the same after tonight." As the first shift workers of Starbase Omega began to trickle into the nebula's edge, they were met with an astonishing sight. Species that had long kept to their own kinds were mingling freely, excitedly discussing plans for a future of unprecedented cooperation. At the center of it all were three humans, Deathworlders who had proven to be not harbingers of destruction, but architects of peace. Jake knew that challenges lay ahead. Centuries of mistrust and misunderstanding couldn't be erased in a single night. But as he looked around at the unlikely allies they'd made, at the bonds forged in the crucible of conflict and resolution, he felt a surge of hope. The label of Deathworlder had long been a burden, a mark of fear and suspicion. But now it was becoming something else, a badge of resilience, adaptability, and the power to bring people together against all odds. As the newly formed coalition began to disperse, making plans to reconvene and begin the hard work of reshaping galactic society, Jake caught the eye of the Genta peacekeeper. The alien gave him a nod of respect, a gesture Jake returned with a smile. In that moment, Jake Morrison knew that they had done more than prevent a bar fight or avoid an interstellar incident. They had sparked a revolution, not one of violence or conquest, but of understanding and unity. The Deathworlders had come to the stars not to conquer, but to connect. And in doing so, they had become the most important species in the galaxy, not through force or fear, but through the very traits that had allowed them to survive their harsh homeworld. Adaptability, resilience, and an unyielding spirit of cooperation in the face of adversity. As Jake joined his friends and their new alien allies in planning for the future, he couldn't help but smile. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was a very good thing indeed.